The right-back position has quietly become one of the most pressing structural concerns at Arsenal as they approach what could be the most important fortnight in the club's recent history. 2 Premier League games remaining, a Champions League final against PSG waiting in Budapest, and the position that should be providing defensive security and attacking width on the right side is currently occupied by injury and uncertainty rather than by first-choice players at full fitness. Ben White's situation was confirmed by Arteta in terms that left no room for optimistic interpretation. His exact words were that it looks like a long-term injury and that White will not be available for many weeks. That phrasing is deliberate and it is specific. Many weeks does not describe a player who might return for the final day at Crystal Palace. It does not describe a player who will be fit for the Champions League final in Budapest. Ben White, as things currently stand, is done for this season. That is the reality, and Arteta was not softening it or managing expectations carefully. He was simply being direct because the situation demands directness. What makes this particularly painful is the context of how White had been performing before the injury struck. He had returned to the side, was back in his groove, linking well with the players around him, overlapping at the right moments, creating the kind of space inside for the attacking players that an intelligent fullback produces rather than forcing. He was back to the level that made him such an important signing from Brighton, and he was doing it at the moment Arsenal needed him most. And then it ended. The fear around the timeline of his recovery extends beyond this season. Those close to the situation have suggested the injury could put his participation at this summer's World Cup in genuine doubt, which gives you some indication of how serious the damage is. This is not a muscle strain that responds to rest. This is something more significant. Timber's situation sits alongside White's and creates a compounded problem in the same area of the pitch. He has now missed 13 games since coming off in the first half against Everton on March 14th. That date is worth holding on to because it illustrates how long Arsenal have been managing without their first-choice right-back. Arteta ruled him out of the Burnley game, but the language around his condition has shifted in the last few days in a way that is genuinely encouraging for the first time in weeks. He has progressed. He is feeling better. The club are doing everything they can to get him available as quickly as possible without taking risks that could jeopardise his longer-term health. Arteta's exact words on Timber carried emotional weight that went beyond tactical assessment. He said Timber is doing everything he possibly can to help the team in any capacity, that the squad knows his leadership and his quality and how much they need him, and that there is a chance, but he cannot say how big that chance is. He added that Timber will do everything possible to convert that chance in the shortest possible time. When a manager speaks about a player in those terms, referencing leadership and the emotional role within the squad alongside the technical contribution, it tells you this is not simply about defensive cover. Timber's presence changes the environment around the team as much as it changes the tactical setup. His return for any part of what remains of this season would be significant on multiple levels. The practical consequence of both absences is Mazraoui at right-back. The 21-year-old has performed well every time he has been called upon in that role this season, and that acknowledgement needs to be stated clearly and without reservation. He has not let the team down, he has contributed positively in difficult circumstances, but the question of asking him to operate against arguably the most in-form left-winger in world football in a Champions League final is a legitimate concern that deserves honest examination rather than reassuring dismissal. Wesley Sneijder identified this exact vulnerability when he assessed the Champions League final. His overall prediction went in PSG's favour, but his reasoning was specific and tactically grounded. He pointed to PSG's threat down their left side as the area where Arsenal could be most exposed, acknowledged the strength of Arsenal's central defensive partnership, and said that everyone with an Arsenal heart would be hoping Timber makes it back because his presence would meaningfully improve the team's chances. That is a significant observation from someone with no emotional stake in the outcome. When someone predicting against you still acknowledges that a specific player's return would change their assessment, you understand how important that player actually is. Arteta was not at home watching Manchester City beat Crystal Palace 3-0 on Wednesday evening. He was at a club sponsors event and did not see the result live. That detail is worth noting because it reflects where his focus is. City's win cut the gap at the top of the Premier League to 2 points. Sainio, Marmoush and Kevin scored without City needing to find another gear. The result confirmed what has been building over the last few weeks. City are not going away, They have found form at the worst possible time from Arsenal's perspective, and Pep Guardiola's side will win every game they are capable of winning between now and the end of the season. But here is the thing that Guardiola himself made clear in his own press conference, and it is the most significant statement of the entire week from a psychological standpoint. He said it depends on Arsenal. He said if they win their last 2 games, there is nothing to discuss. He said all City can do is stay there just in case, and acknowledge that Arsenal's remaining games against Burnley and Crystal Palace are tough but winnable. Read those statements carefully and understand who is saying them. This is not a fan account seeking reassurance. This is not a pundit filling airtime. This is Pep Guardiola, a man who has won the Premier League multiple times, a manager who understands better than almost anyone alive what it takes to win this competition. And he is standing in front of the media, effectively conceding that the title is Arsenal's to lose. That is a genuinely significant moment, and Arteta's players should draw real confidence from it rather than allowing the 2-point gap to create anxiety that the data does not actually justify. The scenario heading into Monday night is straightforward. Arsenal win against Burnley and the outcome goes back into City's hands. If City then fail to beat Bournemouth on Tuesday, Arsenal are Premier League champions without kicking another ball. Arsenal could clinch the title as early as Tuesday night without leaving their homes, watching a match they have no involvement in decide the outcome they have worked 9 months to achieve. Arteta was not engaging with those hypotheticals in his press conference. His focus was entirely on Burnley and on nothing else. That framing is correct. Everything beyond the next 90 minutes is noise until that result is confirmed. The VAR decision that disallowed West Ham's goal against Arsenal has dominated conversation for most of the week and shows little sign of going away, even as other stories develop around it. Arteta gave the diplomatic response in his press conference, saying he did not pay too much attention to the fallout and reinforcing his belief that the correct call was made. The technical assessment from those who examined the decision in detail supports that position. Raya had his arm pulled downward at the moment of the cross, preventing him from making the catch he was positioned to make. The key distinction in the law is the protection afforded to goalkeepers in the act of claiming the ball. For an outfield player, the same contact may not constitute a foul. For a goalkeeper in that specific situation, it does. VAR took considerable time to reach the decision, examining the incident from multiple angles, and the conclusion appears to have been correct on the laws as written. The inconsistency argument from West Ham supporters and neutrals is harder to dismiss. There have been similar situations across the season where the same level of contact on a goalkeeper was not punished in the same way, and that inconsistency creates understandable frustration. But the decision on that specific incident, looked at in isolation, appears to have been the right one. The timing of it in a potential title-deciding moment made the scrutiny inevitable, and the debate will likely continue well beyond this season regardless of what Arsenal do in the remaining games. Crystal Palace on the final day carries genuine jeopardy that should not be minimised or talked away in the rush to celebrate a potential title before it is confirmed. Palace have quality. They won the FA Cup last season, and while they have lost players since that triumph, Oliver Glasner has built a team capable of producing difficult afternoons for anyone at Selhurst Park on the right day. Glasner's press conferences have implied he will prioritise European preparation and rotate accordingly for the final league game, and he appeared to do exactly that in the defeat to City midweek. But even a rotated Palace side still troubled City in the opening 20 minutes. There was a period where the game could have shifted entirely if Brennan Johnson held his run and if a chance from Mateta had been converted. City's quality eventually settled the game, but the pattern before that suggested Palace retain enough threat to make Arsenal's job at Selhurst genuinely demanding. The point being made by supporters and analysts alike is correct though. If Arsenal cannot beat Burnley and Crystal Palace to end a 22-year Premier League wait, they do not deserve to be champions. Those 2 games, assessed objectively, represent a very manageable task for a squad that has led the division for the overwhelming majority of this season. The remaining schedule is not forgiving by the standards of what Burnley and Palace will want from their final games, but Arsenal's quality is sufficient to handle both if the performances are at the right level. Micah Richards' warning deserves repeated emphasis because it comes from a place of genuine lived experience rather than theoretical concern. Richards was part of the Manchester City squad that nearly threw away the Premier League title on the final day against Queen's Park Rangers before Sergio Aguero's famous goal rescued it in the most dramatic fashion in the competition's history. His account of what that dressing room felt like in the build-up to that game and during it is instructive. He described looking around at the leaders expecting to feel calm and instead sensing tension throughout. He talked about looking at Vincent Kompany, normally the most composed presence in any room, and seeing him fidget. His core observation is that Arsenal have never done this under Arteta. They have never crossed this specific line before. The experience of winning a Premier League title, of knowing what it feels like to be in this position and getting over it successfully, is something this squad simply does not have in its collective memory. Manchester City under Guardiola had crossed that line multiple times before Richard's famous final day. Arsenal's group is navigating it for the first time, and the psychological difference between those two situations is real and should not be dismissed as irrelevant. The Odegaard versus Eze question for Monday night is genuinely a positive problem, and it is worth pausing on that framing for a moment. Having two players of that individual quality competing for the same starting position in a title run-in is a situation most managers in English football would welcome with both hands. Whoever starts against Burnley on Monday rests for Crystal Palace. Whoever rests on Monday starts at Selhurst Park. The flexibility that provides across two demanding games in a short space of time is a genuine advantage, and Arteta's ability to rotate quality rather than simply rotating players is a reflection of the squad depth built over several seasons. This is not a problem, this is an asset. Victor Gyökeres's form at this stage of the season is also an asset that was not guaranteed to materialise in this way. David O'Leary, who spent 18 years at Arsenal and made 722 appearances for the club, spoke this week with characteristic honesty about what he has observed from the striker in recent weeks. His assessment was that Gyökeres looks a more effective player than he did earlier in the campaign, that something has clicked in recent weeks in the understanding between striker and system, and that Arsenal have found a way to use him that suits his specific qualities at exactly the right moment. O'Leary was careful to acknowledge he is not claiming Gyökeres is technically the most refined centre-forward. He is identifying that the adjustment has produced visible results on the pitch and that the timing of that adjustment could not be more favourable. The brace and assist against Fulham, the heroic performance against Atletico Madrid in the Champions League, these were not peripheral contributions in minor matches. These were pivotal moments in significant games at a stage of the season when contribution from the centre-forward position matters most. They have changed the conversation around Gyökeres from a question about whether the £55 million signing from Sporting CP represented the right investment to a clear statement about who Arsenal's undisputed first-choice striker is heading into the final stretch. Arteta finding the right way to use him at this specific moment in the season is not accidental. That is tactical intelligence applied under sustained pressure, and it is working. The Timber timeline for a potential return to the squad is the variable that shapes everything else about Arsenal's preparation for the Champions League final. Even if he makes no contribution in the remaining Premier League games, even if the medical team decide the risk of involving him against Burnley or Crystal Palace is not worth taking, getting him to a point of fitness and readiness for Budapest would be transformational for how Arsenal approach that game. His physical qualities, his ability to defend against pace and directness in wide areas, and his understanding of how to operate in Arteta's system make him the player best equipped on the Arsenal squad to contain the specific threat PSG will bring down that left side. Arteta's comments about the atmosphere surrounding the club, specifically his description of what it felt like when the team coach was greeted by supporters before the Atletico Madrid game, tell you something important about how he is thinking about the psychological environment heading into these final games. He described looking at the staff around him on that bus and seeing something in their eyes that felt genuinely different, a level of passion and engagement and shared purpose that he had not experienced in quite the same way before. He said they had taken something to a different level in that moment, and now he wants to create the same energy around the Burnley game. When a manager speaks in those terms before a potential title-deciding home match, it tells you he understands that winning a First League title in 22 years will require more than tactical clarity. It will require the right collective belief inside that stadium from the moment the players walk out. The commercial dimension of this moment is also worth briefly acknowledging. Arsenal announcing Dell as their new official sleeve partner from next season, the second global brand ever to feature on that sleeve position, is a reflection of where this club's commercial standing is right now. Clubs that attract multi-year partnerships of this scale are clubs operating at the top of the global game. The financial infrastructure being built alongside the football infrastructure tells you the ambition is not just about this season or next, It is about sustained presence at the highest level over a long period. Jakub Kiwior's permanent move to FC Porto for €17 million plus add-ons with a sell-on clause retained is clean and sensible business. A player who had fallen down the squad hierarchy leaves for a reasonable fee, with Arsenal maintaining a future financial interest. It is the first confirmed summer exit, and it reflects the kind of clear-headed squad management that has characterised the recruitment approach under this leadership. The staff travel situation for the Champions League final has generated real anger inside the club, and the feelings are understandable. Arsenal staff being asked to contribute approximately £859 each to travel to Budapest, while PSG are covering the same costs for all their employees, is a contrast that speaks to something beyond finance. The people being asked to pay for their own travel to the club's biggest match in decades have contributed every day of this historic season. How a club treats those contributions in moments like this is a measure of internal culture, and the gap between how Arsenal and PSG are handling it is significant. Pull everything together, and the picture that emerges is of a club operating at the absolute edge of what is possible across multiple fronts simultaneously. 2 Premier League games remaining, a Champions League final in Budapest, a 2-point lead at the top of the table, a right-back position carrying significant injury problems, a captain in Odegaard who has navigated his own fitness challenges to be available at the critical moment, a goalkeeper in Raya who has been the best in the Champions League this season by any objective measure, a striker in Gyökeres who has found his best form at exactly the right time, a central defensive partnership in Saliba and Gabriel that Snyder himself acknowledged as being of genuine top quality, and a manager in Arteta who Theo Walcott described this week as the heart of Arsenal, the person without whom everything built over the last several years would not exist, and whose new contract is not just sensible business, but essential business. Guardiola said it plainly: if Arsenal win their games, it is done. The 2-point gap, the injury concerns, the psychological challenge of crossing a line this squad has never crossed before, all of it is real and none of it should be minimised. But the evidence, the data, the remaining schedule and the words of the manager sitting at the other end of this title race all point in the same direction. Arsenal are the team standing closest to something historic. Burnley on Monday is the next step. Everything else follows from that.